He never lifted a weapon.
He is the person pulling the strings behind the scenes and sometimes at the front.
Yet every warrior moved to his will.
How does one character who doesn't even lift a weapon become the sort of hero of it?
When he appears, it's always impactful. The person who is engineering strategy day after day.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Mythik Dialogues. I'm Manish Hari Prasad, and I'll be your host for the evening. I have been a creative head at YouTube Motion Pictures, an ex-creative officer at Red Chillies, and now creative director at Mythik. And I've always been a huge fan of all ancient Indian literature. In this very special episode that we are doing on the genius of Krishna, it's going to be an action-packed episode. While there is so much that can be spoken about Krishna, his childhood, his youth, and his years in Dwarka, in this episode, we are focusing on his genius in the Mahabharata. Do hit the like button right now and subscribe to the channel. Our guest today is Dr. Vishal Sharma, lecturer in the Department of Religion at Princeton University, a historian of South Asian religions. He earned his doctorate in philosophy in Sanskrit from the University of Oxford. And his work explores how texts like Ramayana and Mahabharata shaped thoughts and identity in the Indian subcontinent over time. Welcome to Mythic Dialogues.
Thank you, Manish. Happy to be here and happy to meet you.
So Vishal, let me jump into it right away. Krishna is such a fabulous topic to sort of talk about. I've been a huge fan of all the literature that has been written on Krishna and how Krishna has sort of shaped Indian thought for so long. Now, for someone who doesn't know Krishna, how would you describe him to them? Maybe tell us about your favorite Krishna story while you are at it.
Krishna is, especially in the context of the Mahabharata, he is the person pulling the strings behind the scenes and sometimes at the front, at the head of the drama. He is the chief strategist for the Pandavas. He eventually becomes Arjuna's charioteer. Um, and of course, the Krishna the Mahabharata is occupied with Krishnas, I should say, because you have really three Krishnas in the Mahabharata. You have Krishna, who refers to Draupadi. You have Krishna Dvaipayana, who refers to Vyasa, and of course you have the Krishna we'll be discussing today, Krishna Vasudeva. And one of really one of my favorite episodes of Krishna in the Mahabharata has to be this really it really is really the fifth book, the Udyoga Parva of the Mahabharata, where he's in some ways first in behind the scenes leading the negotiations, and then he comes to the forefront and meets the Kauravas to lead the negotiations to hopefully find peace before war. Because I think it really exemplifies, it really shows uh, Krishna at his masterful best, in that he's managing these different sides. In some ways, it's clear he sees what's inevitably going to come. He doesn't seem to have much faith in the possibility of peace at that point. He sees the writing on the wall, but the drama plays out as it does with Krishna in a very beautiful way.
Beautiful. In fact, even for me, Udyog Parva is what sort of sets the character of Krishna up for what is about to come. But before we delve into the individual parvas of Mahabharat, let me ask you a straightforward question. What really was Mahabharat, and why was it called the Mahabharat? So yeah, I think that would be a good question to sort of. A lot of people would have wondered as to why is it called Bharat. It is, and why the Mahabharat?
It is the story of the descendants of King Bharata. So the Bharata with the it is when we in Sanskrit, as you know, we use it to refer to a descendant or lineage of X or Y, and it's of course the great story um, of these descendants. Um, it's said that there's sort of three stages to the Mahabharata, and in the Adi Parva it talks about the Jaya, the story, the story of victory,
Yeah.
and then there's the Bharata, and then there's the Mahabharata, which is the form that we have now. Um, and of course, I mean, I find that the Mahabharata, that Mahat that is at the first half of that word, is an allusion to its size. It's a very self-aware text. Um, there's a verse that says, because of its mahatva, because of its greatness, and because of its weight, its bharat, that it is such a heavy text. Literally because of its size, it's called the Mahabharata. Um, so this is a very self-aware text that leans into its size and its awareness that it's covering a number of things. I mean, as we know, there's that famous verse, uh, Mahabharata, that says, "What exists here, as in what exists in the Mahabharata, exists elsewhere. But what doesn't exist here, what isn't in the text, doesn't exist."
Definitely.
It's a very self-aware.
Beautiful. We've all grown up listening to that. I mean, and pardon my ignorance, but I always thought that it was called Mahabharat because practically every state of the erstwhile Bharat or the ancient Bharat sort of took part in it, either from this side or from that side, and which is what led to it being called the Mahabharat, or the story of the entire Bharat as we know it. But yeah, okay. So when we think of the Mahabharata, I mean, we always get this huge picture of, there are these vast armies, there are these no, warriors who've never been defeated, and there are these phenomenal astras and shastras and the vyuha rachna that happens through by the commanders of both the sides. But at the heart of it all, there is someone who stands at the heart of it all, and that is Krishna. It's amazing that Krishna sort of comes in at a much later stage in the Mahabharata. He's sort of not someone who's right there from the beginning. But at the heart of that Mahabharata stands Krishna, and he never even lifts a weapon in this, Mahabharata, which is a war epic. How does one character who doesn't even lift a weapon become the sort of hero of it? I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's an amazing creation by Krishna Dwaipayan in terms of how he in an epic full of wars, he could make a guy who doesn't even lift a weapon the hero of that epic?
Yeah, it's an amazing feat, because, as you say, he doesn't, he's not at the front and center of the story from the beginning of the Mahabharata, from the Adi Parva. He comes in later in the story, and he, you know, if we think of the Mahabharata, or these central books in the middle of the Mahabharata, the Bhishma Parva, the Drona Parva, the Karna Parva, the Shalya Parva, as the central battle books where all the action is. In theory, too, he doesn't really fight. There's a threat of it at one point, but he doesn't engage in battle himself. So you would think that he is therefore not really central to the story. But the genius of Krishna Dvaipayana's work is that it, even despite not actually engaging in battle in this great war that is at the center of the text, he is the person who is engineering strategy day after day. And because of that, when he appears, it's always impactful. It's impactful to
Mm.
the storyline, it's impactful to the other people he's speaking to, and it's impactful to the message of the Mahabharata at any given point. So, you know, Vyasa is very careful with how he uses him, but anytime he uses him, it makes an impact because of that. He isn't fighting, but he is really leading the charge from behind the scenes in the fights.
Beautiful. So, can you tell us when do we see Krishna for the first time in Mahabharata? It's after the Draupadi Swayamvar, or during the Draupadi Swayamvar, that he sort of thinks that these Brahmins could be Pandavas, because Pandavas were supposed to be dead by that point in time. Some charred bodies were found in the Lakshagra. So is that the first time we see Krishna in the Mahabharata?
Yeah, yeah, that's the first time, he makes an appearance in the narrative of the Mahabharata. Of course, the text opens itself with an homage to Narayana, Narayanam Namaskritya, Naram Chaiva Narottama. But his actual uh, his actual intervention into the story right there, yeah, where you know, and that's from there on we see his, if I could put it this way, his rapport that he builds with the Pandavas, that he has with the Pandavas from that moment onwards, and the relationship that continues to build from there. Really, from his first entry into the story, we see him building this close relationship with the Pandavas.
Beautiful. So, you know, I've always wondered as to, was Krishna? I mean, see, Krishna, I think, was a maternal cousin to all the Pandavas. His own father and Kunti, the mother of all the Pandavas, being siblings. So, you know, one of the things that I've always wondered is that he was a maternal cousin to all the Pandavas. Yet his relationship with Arjun was, Arjun was a little special. I think he considers Arjun a sakha, a dear friend, and which is way more than just the familial relationships, and way more important than the other Pandavas. So, can you elaborate on that part a little bit as to why Arjun was closer to him than any other Pandav?
Sure. He's throughout the text, we know that Arjuna is an amsha or a portion of Indra, and of course, Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. Um, but we see the two of them they're referred to throughout the text as Nara and Narayana. Um,
Ah,
And so, as Nara meaning, in some ways, man and Narayana. We're told that even in previous instances, Nara and Narayana were two rishis uh, who performed austerities together. So, in many ways, the Mahabharata sets up their relationship on in some ways they hint at this kind of cosmic level to their relationship. And later interpreters will take that Nara and Narayana metaphor to mean the jiva and the atma, and sort of the union between the two, the meeting of the two. From that point onwards, from the Swayamvara onwards, we see the two of them building this friendship, as you put it, this this relationship of trust and fondness for each other. They go together to the forest to really burn the Khandava forest to build what will eventually become the palace. They go on these adventures together, and they form this bond that is very much set up even before that point in the Bhagavad Gita. I always know, if we read the Bhagavad Gita outside the context of the Mahabharata, we may wonder what leads to this kind of level of honesty between these two people, between a charioteer and a driver, a charioteer and a warrior, right? But there's already this relationship that is built, this trust that is built, that the two of them can speak like that.
yeah. Built through friendship, built through Arjuna's marriage to Subhadra, built through them, yeah, built through all of that, and then it's no surprise that he he sort of decides to be a charioteer to Arjuna, and impart the Gita knowledge to Arjuna only. So beautiful. Thank you for this answer. And tell me, at this point in time, just before the Mahabharat war, what was the sort of geopolitical situation of various states at that point in time, and where did sort of Krishna fit into all that geopolitics? Because the more I read Mahabharat, the more you realize that almost every duel in the war is actually not something that is happening just at that particular moment. It is a rivalry that has carried on for a really long time, and there are these, there are grandsons of people who fought, ages ago, who are now sort of giving a final touch to that rivalry during the war, whether it is Bhurishrava and Kartik, or whether it is Bhagdat or many other people like that. So yeah, so if you can tell us a little bit about the geopolitical situation of those times, and how, I mean, where did Krishna sort of stand within all of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it helps us understand a little bit about what happens in the war itself, and some of Krishna's as well. Especially if we think about the geopolitical situation vis-a-vis Dwarka and of course the kingdom there and where the Yadavas are. Um, the Yadavas, they at this point at the by the time even the negotiations are happening for peace, but war is becoming inevitable. There's already tension between, for example, the the state of Magadha and Dwarka. Um,
Uh,
we see that
the
we've
old,
seen
this the
already
old There's the old rivalry of Jarasandh with which sort of started with the killing of Kansa.
with the killing of Kamsa, yes. And so, he wants to avenge that. And then there's this, there are these, there's Shalya who gets involved in that. Shalva, sorry. Shalva gets involved in that and he attacks Dwaraka. Of course, Krishna and the Yadavas leave Mathura. They leave Mathura for Dwarika because of this geopolitical situation and the just immense power of Magadha nearby in that area. And that Magadha, we know even in the time of the Buddha was a very powerful uh, political center. It
Yeah,
seems that
I
Magadha is always
Yeah, I actually read somewhere that the total armies of Magad were greater than the combined armies that fought in the war of Mahabharat. So he had a 27 Akshauhini army, and the total, I think the 18 Akshauhinis is what fought in the Mahabharat war. 7 from Pandavas side and 11 from the Kaurav side. So yeah, Magad was an extremely. And did it make sense at that point in time for Krishna to sort of leave Mathura and establish a new city? Or do you think it was just a poetic license that Krishna Dvapayan took?
I think about it as which in some ways goes back to the theme of what we've been talking about so far. I think of it as part of the strategic approach that Krishna takes. He is now in a place like Dwaraka that is actually not as close to a place like Magadha. Um, and that has important strategic benefits. He is not at a place that is as accessible to these other to the power center, as it were. So it in some ways maybe goes back to this idea of Krishna as a strategist. He doesn't just retreat, but he chooses a place strategically on the coast, like Dwarka. And of course, we know that even in history, um, that coastal region would have been an important trade center as well, because it's on the coast. So an important economic hub. So um, it sort of speaks to his own strategy and maybe how he wanted to position himself. If we're talking about about the geopolitics of it, how he wants to position himself against the others.
Beautiful. So the Vishal, the way I have seen the Krishna story in the story of Pandavas, I mean, there is a Krishna story that goes in a certain manner with no interference from the Pandavas in the early days. His childhood, his youth, his time in Dwarka. So first in Mathura, Gokul, Vrindavan, then Mathura again, and then in Dwarka. And the Pandavas are having their own sort of issues that they are fighting against. I mean, their father is no more, and now they have come back, and they're asking for what is due to them, which is maybe the entire state or maybe half of the state at least. Now, the after the first meeting that happens, which is him hearing about his bua's sons being killed in the Lakshagra, and then pleasantly surprised to sort of find them alive. He is practically with them, but he sort of just retreats from their life once in a while to take care of stuff back home, back in the Dwarka, whether it is the stealing of the Svantak money or some of those things, or the attack by Shalva, as you had earlier mentioned. But really, I think the once he decides to become a part of this Mahabharat, the war, the most pivotal moment in that war is actually when both Arjun and Duryodhan sort of want to bring him to their side. And there's that famous and most beautiful story of Krishna sleeping and both of them reaching his chambers. Can you elaborate on that? And what really did Krishna have a role to play in him being selected as Arjun's charioteer? So that, I mean, did he sort of underplay himself a little too much so that Duryodhan would be happy to give him away to the Pandavas, or how do you see that?
I see it as really, I mean, in some sense, Arjuna arrives, but he's not necessarily first, if I remember correctly. He's not the first to arrive.
Yeah,
I think it's Duryodhana.
Duryodhan is the
If we're thinking, okay, in terms of fairness, he came first, so he gets, first dibs, as they would say. But,
yeah.
Krishna says, well, look, the first person I saw when I opened my eyes is the person who was by my feet, and that's Arjuna. And I think
Where was Duryodhan?
then I think by his head.
So there was some other seating by his head which Duryodhan sort of took, and Arjun decided to sort of
Whereas Arjuna
stand at.
was, maybe at the bedside by his feet.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
so he doesn't. In some ways, I think he knows that. The interesting idea we can play with is, let's just say he gives Duryodhana that choice first. Does Duryodhana choose him to be his charioteer? Uh, I
What was
I
the choice given? Sorry, what choice did he give? Was there a very specific choice that he gave to both the suitors?
yeah. So he says, I have he rules out his own personal participation in the war,
Okay.
but he says that
So he very
I
clearly
have two
said that he is not going to.
But he says, I have two options. I have this army of warriors that I can give to one side, to lend to one side, or have allied with one side, and I have myself as a charioteer. Um, and Arjuna, really without hesitation, says, "I I want you to be my charioteer." And Duryodhana is perfectly happy with that because he gets the army, and he sees that as a win for himself. So the thought experiment would be, what if he does give Duryodhana the first choice? I still think Duryodhana still doesn't pick him as a charioteer. I think he still sees, and that has to do with not only the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna, but I think what's really telling about that episode is it's one of those things that are showing you the relationship between Duryodhana and Krishna. There are many times in the Mahabharata leading up to that point, and then during the negotiations, especially, where it is clear that Duryodhana does not have really an inclination as to who Krishna really is. So there are these moments in the negotiations, even after, where Vidura tells Duryodhana, he says, and Krishna's coming, and he's negotiate, and Duryodhana really sees it as, it's done, that I'm not giving anything, and whoever comes, it's fine. And Vidura tells him, he says, you don't really know Krishna. Now, on a literal sense, on a literal level, that isn't, obviously he knows Krishna. He's already met him and he's spoken to him. But there's already a hint that Vidura knows more about Krishna and his identity and who he really is in a way that Duryodhana does not appreciate. And
Mm.
even though Arjuna is given uh, that first choice and he chooses him to be his charioteer, um, I think Krishna has them both leaving satisfied because both Arjuna and Duryodhana have left that room thinking they've gotten the best of it. They've gotten the best of this.
Not just
This
satisfied, but even happy to an extent,
Yeah.
because Arjun would have him. It's amazing that you choose one person who's not ready to fight, who's not ready to lift up a weapon, and on the other side there is this humongous, sort of battalion of a army that Krishna has, very chosen warriors, and Yadavs were supposed to be phenomenal at warfare.
Yeah.
Was that so? Uh, I mean, obviously, once it all ended, we do realize that the immense part that Krishna played in the result that Mahabharata sort of reached. But it would be almost impossible for any regular human being at that point in time to make that choice and say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to take one guy who's going to chariot my horses." And yes, he has a little bit of philosophical knowledge, but other than that, I don't know what's the use of him. But yeah, I still ended up Arjun still ended up choosing him, and yeah, that sort of changed the way changed the course of the Mahabharat war. It was amazing. I've always sort of told that story whenever whenever people have asked me, and I was like, this was the kind, the word that I think you were looking for was faith. That that Duryodhana never had that kind of a faith in Krishna. I remember even during the Udyog Parva, uh, Duryodhan constantly berates him, calling him a trickster and a magician and nothing more. And which was quite surprising, because everyone else seemed to be pretty much in awe of Krishna, including the big guys like Bhishma and Vidur. But yeah, Duryodhan never thought much of him.
Duryodhana never, and that relationship really reaches a climax at the end of the war, when Duryodhana, after it's over now, he's been defeated in that Gada Yuddha, that mace battle with Bhima. He really fixes his anger not on Bhima but on Krishna, and he lets him have it at the end. All the simmering tension that is building at this point comes to a crescendo then, where he talks about his role in the war. And at some point, the seeds for that are planted in this negotiations, when Vidur is trying to tell him something, where Sanjaya is even telling Dhritarashtra on the eve of Krishna's arrival that, look, this person that we see as Krishna is something more than that. He acts in a certain way, ki nashiva durbala, that he acts almost powerlessly as a peasant, but that's not what's happening here.
Mm.
Be aware, be awakened to what's going on here. This person is playing a deeper role in this than you realize. Ignore it. You will ignore it to your own peril, right? And they ignore it. They ignore it. Um, Even before in the Shishupala episode, right? We're told that when Krishna slays this enemy known as Shishupala, when he beheads him, that Shishupala's, his tejas, his light, his radiance merges with Krishna, and the others don't see that. Bhishma sees that, but the people who are actually in the assembly, like Duryodhana, has no awareness of that. He doesn't see that part. He's not able to see that. So we're already seeing a contrast in how Duryodhana views Krishna in contrast to
Uh,
maybe Arjun.
I'll, I'll come to the Udyog Parva, I think, and I think in there you will be able to tell us a little bit more about how Duryodhan saw Krishna. But before that, there's one question that I've always had. So there is Krishna, and then there is Krishna, Draupadi, who he calls his best friend. I mean, it's amazing that there are two great friends that he has, and one is Arjun and one is Draupadi, and one is a Sakha and Draupadi is a Sakhi. So, can you elaborate a little bit on the relationship between Krishna and Draupadi? I mean, long before he sort of he helped her in the in the Vastraharan episode, there was a special relationship that Krishna shared with Draupadi. So, would you please elaborate a little on that?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, his entrance into the story of the Mahabharata is tied to Draupadi, because he first appears at her Swayamvara. That's where we first meet him with with Balarama. And throughout the story, throughout the narrative, we have this close relationship between the two of them. Um, of course, you mentioned um, Draupadi's disrobing, and in versions of the Mahabharata that are popular today, it's she has a prayer to Krishna, and that prevents it from happening. Of course, that version isn't in the critical edition. It's
Yeah.
just she's disrobed. She's prevented from disrobing. But this is a very, very well-known episode where, in many versions of the Sanskrit Mahabharata, we have Krishna himself intervening. But even
And
after,
it's done virtually. It's not done in person, right? The whole
yeah,
saving. Yeah, so,
he is, the whole thing is he is in Dwarka at the moment, or en route to Dwarka at the moment when that
yeah.
happens. So he is not, he's not present in a way that anyone else was seen. Um, but even after that, when he appears in when he's in exile and he meets with them, he is in many ways a constant advocate for her and for the justice that she needs, the justice that she sees that she needs, that she wants to see as a result of what happened to her. Um, and so the relationship between these two Krishnas, Krishna and Krishna, are pivotal to the unfolding of the war, and then of course the war itself and how it plays out, um, and then what happens after that. Um, they share this special bond, definitely.
So, but why I brought this question up is because of a particular incident that happens just before the Udyog Parva, which is when Krishna is actually leaving as a peace ambassador or a peace emissary for Hastinapur. He has this phenomenal conversation with Yudhishthir first, and then Bhim, and then with Draupadi, where Draupadi still is seeking revenge, and Krishna actually assures her that she will get her revenge, in spite of the fact that he was leaving for a peace mission. And I've always wondered how, how amazing would his I don't know, his thought process be to actually know that his peace efforts, and he actually made all the peace efforts with all his heart, but to know the opposite side so well that he realizes that his peace efforts are actually not going to be successful, and hence that assurance to Draupadi about her getting her revenge. So can you sort of talk that a little bit?
I think this goes back to Krishna as the strategist. Um, he isn't as this is I mean, at that point, there's been a series of conversations between the two sides that have not worked out, and he's he's doing the job that he was asked to do, which is try to negotiate a peace settlement, as it were. But he's a realist in that he knows the position of the other side, and unless there is some magical, really supernatural change of heart from Duryodhana, uh, this thing is going to happen. There is nothing that um, they are now on a collision course. So at the same time, he wants to, he's keeping Yudhishthira happy and satisfied by doing what Yudhishthira would feel is putting out all stops before we go to war, because war should always be this last option, not the
Sure.
first. But he communicates different things to different people, and in the process, you can see where his thinking is going into it. And I feel like he speaks to Draupadi last because you can kind of see where his thinking really is at that last moment. So his message to these different people, to Yudhishthira, to Bhima, and then to Draupadi, are meaningful because you can kind of uncover the layers in how he's thinking about this negotiation. And from that, you can tell he is very much with Draupadi at that moment, and how she's feeling. And he is fairly convinced that this isn't, you know, this is basically a formality at this point, unless there's some magical changing in positions. But he's going to do it. He's going to do it anyways because war should always be the last resort. But he knows that this is an inevitability, and he tells her, you will have this retribution that you're looking for.
In fact, like how the way he preps Yudhishthir into saying, "Okay, yes, fine, we will do the peace effort," and then he sort of talks to Bhim and tells him, where I mean, doesn't the blood boil and you have lost all your power, etc., etc. To his Bhim is like, if there is a war, I'll sort of, yeah. So he sort of props him up, and then he meets Draupadi, who basically is like, "Why are you even trying to do this? Shouldn't we all be seeking revenge because that's what we want?" And he's like, "Yeah, you'll get your revenge. If you have any faith in me, trust me, you'll get your revenge." And that led me to think, did he actually want the peace process to fail? And that's, I think, the beauty of the writing, where you are led into different directions, and you're like, oh, if Krishna is taken on a mission, it would be successful. And how can a mission that Krishna takes on not be successful? And lo and behold, and then you see what really is happening at that point. It's beautiful. And now we come to, I think, the interesting, the most important part, which I feel Ved Vyas had written, the Udyog Parva. It's the chapter of efforts. And like this is something that I find very common between the two epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. That before the big war, there are multiple efforts that are made to sort of avoid the war. So while very often people do think of these epics as the epics of war, I would say that these epics are literally these epics actually tell you a lot about why there should not be war, and what are the kind of efforts that should be made, all the diplomatic efforts, all the personal efforts that should be made to avoid the war. It is about the cruelty and the sadness that comes with the war, and the kind of efforts that should be made before you get into any kind of a war. So tell us a little bit more about the efforts that were made in Ramayana. Yes, they sent Hanuman, and then they sent Angad, and then you also had people. So it was beautiful the way they tried to avoid the war even in Ramayana. Tell us a little bit about the peace efforts that were made during the Mahabharata, and what role did sort of Krishna play in it? Was Krishna the only peace ambassador that was sent, or were there others? And then when Krishna went, why did it all fail?
At the time, by the time that Krishna goes as, and you're right that there's a certain, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, they rhyme in certain ways. They have certain episodes that kind of you have the exiled leader force and different things there you have, and these peace negotiations are an important element to both. And like you say, it's actually maybe telling us something not about glorifying violence, but the necessity of making that decision with a very sober mind after having ruled out other options. Um,
Yeah.
and so at this point, they have already, by the time Krishna goes to to the capital, they've already had negotiations. Sanjaya has come as well to the Pandava side, and you know there are different arguments. Yeah. So Duryodhana's, one of Duryodhana's views is that no, they haven't served out the full 13 years. That when I found them, or when they were found in the Vedanta court, they were supposed to spend a full year in incognito in this, and they haven't. And because those terms are broken, um, I don't really have an obligation to honor the original deal, which is that they would get their land back.
Yeah.
And of course,
There's
the
the
Pandavas.
sunset dilemma, whether they saw Arjun before the sunset, or after the sunset. Yeah.
It's in some ways a very cool argument, but at the same time, the Pandavas are fairly clear in their position that no, you know, they weren't seen, they did spend out the required time
Yes.
in in disguise. And so, by all of these discussions are already happening beforehand. It's very clear that Duryodhana is not going to give up anything really at that by the time Krishna comes, because they've already had this back and forth. And we talked about Duryodhana going to visit Krishna. They're going to visit him at the beginning of the Udyoga Parva. The
Yeah.
negotiations haven't really fully begun at this point. So
Yeah.
that tells you a lot about where they see these negotiations going, and they're
Yeah.
prepping for something that may happen, and they want to be careful and line line up their allies, because that can often help in negotiations to say, well, do you really want to go to war with me? I have this, that kind of thing that can maybe help in negotiations. But it's already now, by the time Krishna goes to Hastinapur, all of this has happened. So in some sense, he's right to tell Draupadi that, she's going to get her revenge, because it is broken down, the talks, there is no clear path out of these,
Yeah.
of carving something out for both sides. So, he goes there, and of course, he dines with Vidura, and this
Yeah.
becomes this important episode, because it's Vidura who is telling Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, uh, I should say, that look, you don't know Krishna, you don't know who he is, and he's telling him that because he knows who he is. he has an inclination. He is in many ways a devotee of Krishna. And he's trying to prevent them. He's trying to prevent Duryodhana
There,
and Dhritarashtra from killing.
yeah. Dhritarashtra did agree and sort of asked the Shasan to vacate his palace and ask the Shasan to sort of house Krishna in his own palace. And then Krishna doesn't sort of agree to that. He goes
Yeah.
and stays with Vidu. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. He you know, these are the pleasantries of that you part of the pleasantries that you extend to ambassadors and people who are coming for these kinds of things.
Yeah.
They're part of just the conventions and niceties of these kinds of things. And Dhritarashtra in many ways, um, we focus a lot on Duryodhana's role in these negotiations and how it's broken up. But in
Yeah.
theory, Dhritarashtra is the king. But we already get the impression from the way these negotiations are going that he is he's not just physically blind, but he's blind to the defects of his child, that he cannot look past that. He cannot see that his son is leading them down this path. And no matter how much Sanjay is trying to tell him, look, you have to take control of the situation. No matter how much Vidura tells him, he is not in the driver's seat. It is Duryodhana driving these negotiations. And you get the sense that if Duryodhana says we're going to war, Dhritarashtra,
They are.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in many ways, he's not in the driver's seat of those negotiations. Um,
Yeah. So Krishna realizes the Putra Prem and that, the love for the son, which is not going to let Dhritarashtra, file for peace.
yeah, yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, what does his staying at Vidur sort of convey to the Kauravas? And if you can go a little further into what happens, which is one of the loveliest episodes in Mahabharata, what happens further in the Kaurav court? It is something that I think if you can tell us as a story, it would be lovely for people to hear.
That, his choice to go at Vidura, Vidura has an interesting role in that family in the Mahabharata. He is a brother of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, but his mother was a servant of at the court, so he does not have the same status as the other brother. But he's probably the wisest of the three brothers. So his choice to sit and dine and stay with Vidura, it in some ways it leaves a bad taste in Duryodhana's mouth right away. And it's the kind of thing that Duryodhana is looking for to say, yeah, he is not looking for, we don't need to extend, he's coming to slight us. So Duryodhana immediately takes that as a slight, to tell his father, you see, all of these things. Because everyone's telling him that, negotiate with Krishna, you don't know who he is, open your eyes and he said, and this kind of seals the deal for him. The negotiations happen. He famously, declares that, he won't even give an inch of land. He is not giving them land. It's as simple as that. And of course, you see the breakdown in in this discussion with Krishna and at the Kaurava court when they're having these negotiations, where it really is, you understand why he tells Draupadi what he tells him. Like it's not going anywhere. Krishna's hitting a wall. Krishna's trying to reach out to him on the day of the actual negotiations to say, look, this is what they're asking for. You can prevent something terrible is going to happen if you don't do this. He's telling him something that is true. He's reminding him that does not have to be an inevitability. It doesn't have to be this way. And of course, the back and forth at the court breaks down to the extent that, like with Hanuman and the Ramayana, Duryodhana tries to sort of prevent Krishna from leaving by tying him up. And
Yes.
again, you have this in this pivotal moment. You have Duryodhana again being ignorant of who Krishna is for the story, for the narrative, and you have Krishna revealing this Vishwarupa. And for what I remember, Duryodhana doesn't see it. He is not capable of seeing it. He's not capable of realizing. And it goes back to this idea that Krishna plays in the narrative of, a role that is sometimes understated. And the point is not just who knows Krishna, but who knows of Krishna, who knows of his role as Vishnu
Capability.
and not.
Who knows of his capability? It's actually, you're right, because even when the Vishwaroop happens, it sort of I mean, Duryodhan and Karn are sort of out of the court at that point in time, and Krishna sort of just comes to know that, oh, I mean, there's a plan to capture me, and he shows this Vishwaroop, and I mean, even a Dhritarashtra who's blind is sort of given a divine vision to sort of see that Vishwaroop, and Dhritarashtra absolutely just I think Dhritarashtra just goes bonkers, and he's like, "No, I don't think we should be carrying any further, and maybe we should stop Duryodhan from sort of going ahead with his plan of capturing Krishna." And he sort of lets him go very nicely. But yeah, Duryodhan and Karn are not really party to that. Duryodhan, Dushasan, and Karn are not really party to that Vishwaroop.
Yeah.
Do you think anything different? I mean, if they were party to the Vishwaroop, they would have been duly scared to sort of go ahead with the war.
They I That's a good question. I mean, I think the theme being set up until that point is that he is incapable, he wasn't there, but he is incapable of seeing that, of seeing
Hmm.
Krishna. Um, but and of course there is that moment where he doesn't really witness what happens with Shishupala merging with Krishna.
Yeah.
But there is this, you know, there is this interesting thought that maybe if he sees that, he can see the what in what Krishna is saying.
Mm.
But I think that at that point, and this happens with negotiations where people just dig down in where their position is, they're unwilling. They're so unwilling to move. I think at that point, he is so stuck in his way of viewing things that um, it it would have been inevitable. Now, I said it would have taken something magical or supernatural to jolt him into some reality, to see the reality of the situation, and maybe that specific thing would have been, what he needed to see some reason. But we're already led to believe that he is not interested in looking further at Krishna beyond what he sees in front of him, and he's not concerned with who Krishna is in the larger scheme of things. It's just this is his role right now. He's a negotiator, and I too, there's no path to peace here. I'm not giving up on.
So according to you, the war sort of becomes inevitable after the stupidity by Duryodhan of trying to capture a Krishna, and I mean, again, we see the mirroring of Hanuman being captured by Ravan in Ramayana. So do you think the war became sort of inevitable from that point onwards? Or do you think it was inevitable right from the beginning? Like, you know, given the characteristics of Duryodhan and uh, Draupadi, I must say.
I don't know. I tend to look at it on two different levels,
Yep.
on a cosmic level and a human level. So in the Adi Parva, we're told that there's a problem on the earth, that the earth is being overburdened by these corrupt kings. And you talked about, the geopolitical situation, the relationship between these different kingdoms. It dates back to before the Mahabharata and conflict that happened before the war itself. And so, the gods go to Vishnu to try to find a solution to this problem. The earth wants to be unburdened from these corrupt kings who are weighing her down. And he agrees, and he says that, we'll all descend, all these gods and different celestial beings will come in some form on the earth. And the central drama to unburdening the earth is this war. This war will kill so many of these kings.
Hmm.
So in some ways, the Adi Parva, before we get into the human drama, it lets us know that there's a reason for and the war is a means to an end. But then on the human level, you're presented with moments where, okay, it could have played out differently. Um, I think the dicing match is the hard, and the disrobing of Draupadi probably the hardest point of no return in my view. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's a famous play that was written um, after the Mahabharata was composed, and it's sort of an alternate history, or an alternative version of the story where uh, the peace negotiations, there is no war. The peace negotiations do work out.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and there's it's called the Pancharatra, and so there is this even in it's a play in the world of theater. Um, there's this idea that nothing is inevitable on the human level. These things could have maybe it could have played out differently, but for that to have happened, we had to have had Duryodhana and react in different ways to these different situations. So on a higher level, on a cosmic level, that the Mahabharata sets up in the beginning, we're told very clearly what the role is of the war. But then at the human level, part of what the drama interesting is the possibility of other options, that maybe it doesn't have to play out this way. Maybe there are moments where it's like, okay, we're getting closer to that, but it doesn't necessarily have to go in that direction. And that's what makes it compelling.
So I'll come now to, I mean, now that we have discussed the Udyog Parv and how Krishna sort of tried to broker a peace between the two sides. Um, Let me ask you a question. Do you think the morality of Ram was different from morality of Krishna? Even their definitions of what Ram thought of as dharma versus what Krishna thought of as dharma, were those different? Do they stay the same? Do they change with times? And do they change with, I mean, what we call yogas?
Yeah.
If you can, if you want to think for like
That's
10 seconds, yeah.
I think they take two different approaches to dharma in some situations. Rama in the Ramayana, Krishna in the Mahabharata. Um, Krishna, especially when it comes to the dharma of battle. As you know, dharma can mean many things, but even on just a local level of the rules of war, Krishna sees some of these, this goes back to this idea of him as a realist that and pragmatist, as he sees some of these things as a means to an end.
Ah,
And when confronted with uh, questions of whether this person is following the dharma or not, the righteous path, or what a warrior should be doing, what a kshatriya should be doing, you know, he takes a very different approach than Rama. Whereas for Rama, he is trying to embody dharma to its fullest, and there is a very clear hierarchy, and he is, even in moments that are controversial, trying to see himself as not breaking any other dharma, just following the dharma. So if I could, just give a quick example, if you compare the interaction between Vali and Rama after Rama strikes Vali in hiding, right? Now, in both yugas and in both worlds of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, that's a breach of the battle, to hit someone from when they're battling with someone else, to have a third
yeah.
party intervene. And so Vali says, look, you've breached your dharma as a kshatriya because you have not acted honorably in hitting me in the way you've hit me. You have not acted honorably in even striking me, because you and I have no issue.
Yeah.
And I am a Vanara, but I am not I'm not an animal that is hunted. So this is not even against the dharma of a hunter. So you have two, Vali levels two important charges that he says, Rama, you failed in your dharma as a kshatriya by hitting me, and you have failed in your dharma as a hunter. And Rama's response is very simply that, no, I failed in either of those. In terms, the dharma of a kshatriya is to enforce righteousness, and what you've done to your brother and his wife is unrighteous. And so, as a representative of Bharata, I am inclined to enforce that dharma.
Hmm.
And then, of course, the second argument is I am following my the dharma of a hunter, because I have a right to uh, strike a vanara. And when you hunt, you can hunt from hiding. I don't think if Krishna were put in that position, he would make the same arguments. He would be willing to concede that, and we'll get into examples of that in the war, but he would be willing to concede that there are times that you need to uh, overlook certain local dharmas for some kind of greater good. and he is very comfortable in framing it that way. He is very comfortable in also turning the tables on the person who's making the accusation against him, and saying, well, and interrogating whether they were, these people who are calling out Dharma, whether they themselves were always perfectly following.
Whether they were.
So they have two very different relations to it.
Well, this brings us to the end of the first part of this power packed Krishna's Genius episode. In the next episode, we'll delve deeper into Krishna's role in Mahabharat war with Dr. Vishal. So if you guys have any questions, send them to us in the comments right away. Get commenting, and we will see you in the next one.